Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Beebe Book Buzz, the show where your librarians gather to talk about what we've been reading recently so that you can have an idea for your next great read. My name is Karen Stern, and I'm here with my colleagues Jeff Clapes, Beth Radcliffe, and Jackie Powers. And today we're going to start with a name you might know, a name you have heard probably many times before. Jackie's going to talk to us about Fredrik Backman's new book.
Yes, I loved this. You probably remember Fredrik Backman from A Man Called Ova, or Ove, or Ovi. No one could really decide how to say that for a while. But his new book, Anxious People, is out, and I highly recommend it. I loved it. Like all of his books, it's about the characters. There's a plot, but it's really about getting to know the characters and sort of finding out their backstories and what motivates them and how they kind of ended up where they are. And in this book, you start from the end and you kind of work your way into the story. But the sort of impetus for this whole thing is there is a failed bank robbery, which ends in a hostage situation at an apartment viewing, like an open house for this apartment. So the cast of characters you meet are these 8 people that are in this at this viewing. So there's like the kooky real estate agent. There's this this elderly woman who is like completely unfazed by the entire hostage situation. There's a wealthy woman banker. There's a couple who flip houses. There's another couple who are expecting their first child and like can't agree on anything and just are constantly fighting. And then there's this mystery man locked in the bathroom. It's just
sounds very Fredrik Backman.
It's very Fredrik. And you meet these people and you initially have these kind of initial reactions to them, and you I mean, as we all do, you kind of automatically like think you stereotype them. And as the book unfolds, you kind of the situation sort of starts to cause all of their sort of life issues to boil over. So it ends up being like this giant therapy session almost. And you find out about all these people's backstories and like how they ended up in this situation and what they're doing at the house, why they're interested in buying the apartment and everything. And then on top of those characters, you also meet the father and son police team that are investigating this, which is just like another level of I laughed out loud at so many parts of this. It's a father and son, and they are against all sort of recommendations partners. And so they have it's a complicated relationship, and they're also sort of still grieving the loss of the wife and the mother. And so that comes to the forefront, and they both have a backstory that sort of comes out in how they handle this case and how they approach this case. And it's the whole thing is kind of like the gang who can't shoot straight. Like everything's a little like the bank robber doesn't know what's going on, and the police don't really know what they're doing, and they keep threatening to bring in people from Stockholm because it's in Sweden, and they're gonna, as if they're gonna fix everything. And it again, it's really just a character study, because at the end that, like, from the first page, the hostage is up, everybody came out fine, everyone's fine. They can't find the bank robber, so that's kind of the main thing, is they're trying to figure out where this bank robber went. But everyone's fine, so there's not like a lot of tension in that. But so it's really just this character study in this room, and he's just masterful at that. He's so good at striking the right tone. He's poignant without being cloying. He's very good at kind of offering sort of a thought-provoking social commentary without putting it right in your face. It's very, you're kind of pondering these things as the characters are pondering them. And his tone is very matter of fact. There's actually some decently heavy themes. There's like mention of suicides, and one of the characters has a family member who has a drug problem. So it's not light, but he's so matter of fact about everything that it's not callous. It's just, this is the way life is, and these are the problems that people have, and this is how we see people dealing with those problems. And so I listened to it, and it took me forever because I'm not commuting quite as much as I used to. And I cannot recommend the audio enough. The woman who performs this is magnificent. The people's voices are so unique and so perfect for the way that Bachman writes these characters, that they just completely come to life, and you're like, oh my God, I know this person. You can see them, like, it's just perfect. I wanted the book to go on because I just wanted to spend more time with them. I wanted to sort of, you do want to see what happens to them. And she gives you, or he gives you rather, enough closure that you're happy, but it's satisfying enough. But there are a couple characters that I almost wish you would pick up with them in another story, and or build off of this in the way that some characters or some authors do. They kind of take a peripheral character and have another story about them. I really wish you would do that, because there were a couple that just felt like, what did end up happening with her? But really, really well done. And again, there's such a great balance of serious topics with sort of just the comedy that life is. He's so good at that. And so I highly recommend this one. And if you can listen to it, please do. That's Anxious People, and they are all very anxious.
And it sounds like a book for our times. I mean, it's
perfect. I know. I kept thinking, God, thank God these people don't know about COVID. Would just be a whole nother level of anxiety.
all trapped in the apartment together.
How Bridget likes horror because
Alyssa
likes horror because it sort of puts her in another world. Do you think Anxious People would like this because it puts it all in another place?
Kind of. Or you might feel better because it's like, oh, look, everyone has issues. Everyone has these.
Everybody's anxious.
And they're way worse than me,
Yeah, it's one of those where you're like, oh, we really are we're all the same.
Yeah.
And it has a happy ending.
Yeah,
you know that from the start.
Yeah,
so that, I would imagine, allays your anxiety a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. You go into it knowing we're all okay.
Yeah. All right. So from Anxious People, Jeffrey.
Yes.
What you got? Something less.
I have actually, before I talk about my book, I think I did want to make a quick plug because you guys know, but I'm not sure how much anybody else does, that I always love to read the Booker Prize winners. It's one of the premier international fiction prizes. And so I'm actually halfway through one of the 6 shortlist nominees. And today, which I'm not sure when people will actually be watching this particular book buzz, but today is November 19th. And this evening, sometime later today, because it takes place in London, they will be announcing the final winner. So I'm anxious to see who that is. There's some really interesting selections. There's a couple of Americans. There's a Scottish writer. It's all English language, things that were written originally in English. So there's a Scottish author. I'm reading one from Zimbabwe, which is really good. An Ethiopian writer, and a couple of Americans. So it's an interesting mix of nominees, and I'll be curious to see. I haven't read any of the others, so I'll be curious to see
what's the one from Zimbabwe?
It's called The Mournable Body.
This Mournable Body.
This Mournable Body.
We have a copy.
Yes, I have it. I'm reading it as we speak. I'm about halfway through, and it is really good. It's not the one I'm planning to talk about, but I would recommend it. But anyway, so the one I do want to talk about is this one, which is called Got some reflection there. Swimming in the Dark, which is by it's actually a first novel by a young guy named Tomasz Jadrowski, and he's actually German, but he wrote in English, and it takes place in Poland that he has background from. So I've been reading, I found that through much of this year, I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. And the times that I read fiction, I really need something that takes me to a completely different time and place. You can guess why. So it's kind of nice to just escape. So this, I'm not sure this is necessarily a better time and place. It's the late 1980s in Poland. So I wouldn't say this is an incredibly, it's not a funny book in the way that Bachman is, but it certainly gets at the human condition. And it really, as Jackie's book was, it's very much about character. And also very lyrical language. It's pretty impressive for a first novel. In general, it's been described as a gay love story. I think that's kind of simplifying it, because there's really a lot more going on in it than that. And much of it really is about Polish culture, which I don't personally know a lot about, and about the fall of communism in Poland in this time period. So it's a historical, but it's such a recent historical that you may have some memory of the news events in the world. In brief, the plot is that there's a young man named Ludwig, and he meets Janusz, who is a couple of years older than him, at a sort of agricultural work summer camp activity thing. And they become friends, and they, after the summer program is over, they decide they're going to go kind of on a road trip together, and they go camping and get to know each other and eventually become lovers. Then once that's all over and they go back to real life in Warsaw, it's a particularly difficult time in Poland because the trade union protests are starting and communism is teetering on the edge. This is all leading up to 1989. And a lot of the power I found in the book is that these two characters, despite their love for each other, are actually very different politically. Janusz is, he's a working class guy, but he's very, very much dedicated to communism. And Ludwig, on the other hand, is very unhappy with the current state of affairs and would love to leave Poland completely. And they, despite their love for each other, a lot of the book is about how their characters have to resolve this political conflict where they just see the world in very different ways. There's class differences.
In this
I'm sorry?
That will resonate with a lot of people in this country right now.
Yeah, I think so. So eventually, Janusz gets, he's kind of trying to work through the system, whereas Ludwig would prefer to protest and eventually escape Poland to a better life. And they just can't see each other's viewpoints. Janusz eventually gets involved with a young, wealthy woman who's got a very politically connected father. And he's doing this basically because this is my way of getting what I think I want, by working through the system. And Ludwig, of course, thinks that that's a complete ethical sellout. And, so there's all this conflict. There's not a whole lot of plot to it, but it really is all about trying to forge a relationship with someone who is so fundamentally different from you in some ways, and placing it in this time period. It's just everything is tense because of the politics that are going on at the time. But I wouldn't say it's entirely depressing. It ends on it does end on a hopeful note, or at least a satisfying note. And politics went the direction that they were going to go. I mean, this is a historical novel, but it's based on what really happened in Poland. It's even kind of timely now because the Polish government in recent years has kind of taken a bit of a rightward turn. And particularly even in the last year or so, there's been a lot of really homophobic politics going on in Poland that's causing new protests in a very different way. So you can kind of imagine what would these characters do if, 40 years on or 30 years on, they are now older adults living in a modern Poland with a whole new set of issues to deal with. And what would their personalities be like? So I think the things that really made it appeal to me again is, I read for character. I think we all do to some degree. And it's really all about the characters. There are some extraneous, extra secondary characters, but it's really about these two men and the place and the time. I think I love really unusual. I like historicals, but I also like historicals that touch on a time or a place that doesn't always get dealt with. And 1980s Poland isn't something that gets covered.
How much does the place figure into it? Do you get a lot of sort of Warsaw?
Very much, yeah.
Yeah.
I have never been to Poland, but I really, and like I said, not just the place, but the time, because Poland, Warsaw now is not the same as Warsaw as communism was collapsing. And they really did. I thought he did an excellent job. And for a young guy, I don't think he's even 30 yet, and a first novel.
Wow.
It's really good. And it's funny because I saw a review of it months ago. It came out in April. And I saw some article about it and said, oh, I should put that on my list and try and get that at some point. And later on, when it came time to do it, I looked it up, and lo and behold, we had it on the shelf in the new book section.
Yay, Karen.
Yay, Karen.
I always like it when I get one.
Swimming in the dark.
All right. Now we're going to go on to something more crimey with Beth.
Yeah, I don't have the book, but it's Liz Moore's Long Bright River. And it's a police procedural, but like Jackie and Jeff's book, it's really much more, and it's a lot about character. It would be even a mistake to think of it as a police procedural because it's just got so many layers. The crime part really hangs in the background, and in the foreground, it's an in-depth character-driven family drama. The relationship between two sisters, Casey, who is a single mom and a beat cop in Philadelphia, and her sister, her younger sister, Casey. Did I just say Casey before?
Yeah.
Nikki is the older one. Casey is the younger one. Casey is, she's an addict, and she becomes a prostitute to support her addiction. So it is kind of bleak and a melancholy narrative. We learn about the two sisters' childhood, about their closeness. We learn about their losing their mother at an early age and being raised by their very bitter grandmother. Moore draws these compelling characters with nuance and depth, while Mickey, the cop, she's much more of a loner. She is a loner. She wants to do everything on her own. Her sister, Casey, is really gregarious. She's friends with everybody she meets and anybody she meets. And then there's the secondary characters, which I think she does a great job of too. There's Mickey's sweet son, her very steady police partner who is out because he's been shot. And then there's her, the other prostitutes on her beat, Mickey's extended old good boy family, and some of the other young sex workers. Now, although I said they were close, they in fact, they were inseparable before. They have not spoken in years. But Mickey keeps an eye on Casey. In her beat, she drives by Casey's corner, the corner that Casey hangs out on to turn tricks. But she hasn't seen her in a while. And she asks Casey's friends, she asks other people. No one has seen her sister for weeks now. So she's really worried about her. And this at the same time that there is a murderer on the loose who is killing young prostitutes, young female prostitutes. So she's really worried. Now, Moore breaks her novel into sections labeled then and now. And she fills each one with short, direct chapters that explore Mickey's history while propelling the narrative of the murder mystery forward. It's all told from Mickey's point of view, so first person point of view, and we see her personal journey that runs parallel to her pursuit of the killer. Smartly crafted with a layered plot that builds in momentum as it goes on. Then there's Philadelphia, another book that's the place is really important. Leanne will love this. Or I think she already read it. She probably loved it.
Yeah. She did love it.
Yeah, it's practically another character. Most of the novel takes place in a neighborhood that used to be filled with working class families. But when the jobs left, people either chose to leave or were forced out. So it's those abandoned buildings have become a place, a home for homeless, for drug dealers, and for drug addicts. But for Mickey, there's also some other parts of the city that's a little more hopeful, where she is currently living. I don't think there's going to be a sequel to this just for the ending. And the ending, by the way, you see her growth and there's hope shining through. But I don't think it'll have a series, just the way it ended. But I am looking forward to reading her past books, because she has 3 other books that she already published, and to any novels she produces in the future, because it was really like the other 2 books we talked about today. It's very well written. And you guys will be so pleased. This is, if you like Tana French, which I know you guys do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was going to ask.
Recommend it, yeah. And also Dennis Lehane. I think that people that like Dennis Lehane would like this too. One more book I want to tell you about that's similar to this. I want to tell you about it because it's also a 2020 book. It's called The Wolf That Wants In by Laura McHugh. And that also deals with the opioid crisis and 2 young women grappling with their dark family secrets of their siblings. So that was, I was talking about Liz Moore's Long Bright River.
Great. Yep, definitely another one.
Brain freeze there.
It's okay. It was dramatic effect.
Yeah. When you said police procedural that's really about character, I was like, oh, Tana French.
Tana French.
Now,
Yeah.
have you guys read the new one? I'm
Yeah,
still
we
on the
have.
waiting list for it. Okay.
We actually talked it here last time.
We talked it last time, so watch that first. No,
I'm,
Don't know it.
I'm
Watch it
anxiously awaiting my turn.
Yes. Well, it's funny. As Beth was introducing hers, I thought, oh, well, mine's kind of like the mirror image of that, because I would say if you're in the mood for a book with a lot of action, because this is also about crime in a different way, but when I say action, I mean like heists and bloody shootouts and getaways. Then The 12 Lives of Samuel Hawley by Hannah Tinty, which the book I forgot to bring, but we'll show you a picture, will satisfy all your needs for action and violence, because at least half of that book is about this man, Samuel Hawley, who is a career criminal and who finds himself in a lot of dark places. But despite that darkness, this is also a tender-hearted coming-of-age story, a father-daughter story, and a story about how to become a hero like maybe none you've ever read before. How to describe the feel of this? I mean, this grit and violence and this tenderness all in one. If you kind of think about all the tales of inner lives of criminals you've ever read or watched on TV or movies, I'm thinking here like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, or Bonnie and Clyde, or there's a kind of tiny bit of the feel of that in the tenderness part of one of those criminal buddy movies, but without the Hollywood glitz and glam. This is much more gritty. The levels of darkness here are like Godfather levels, but without the sprawling scope and cast. And even they actually get down to kind of like Tarantino levels. There's some scenes that just stick in your head, as the violence is just so crazy that it's almost funny, you know, that sort of over the top level. So that's my attempt to kind of give you a feel for this book, which is ultimately the story of Samuel Hawley, this man trying and trying and trying to redeem himself in and through his relationship with his daughter, Lou, short for Louise. It's no accident that Samuel Hawley's 12 lives echo the 12 tasks of Hercules. Tinty has said that she loosely based this story on this Greek hero who was given the 12 seemingly impossible tasks to try to redeem himself for killing his wife and his children. So while Hawley's tasks aren't quite as glamorous as Hercules, and you probably would call him an anti-hero rather than a hero, his wife Lily does die along the way in circumstances that form part of the mystery of this book. And Hawley does spend years after her death trying to keep his daughter out of danger, going on the run from place to place. And just for a little bit of flavor in those, so, you know, they move a lot around sort of almost every year, that Hawley and his young daughter. And every time they move, he's taught her to like pick up and go in like 10 minutes. You only take the basics, you leave everything behind. But the one thing that he always takes with him is this makeshift shrine to Lily, his dead wife. It's made up of kind of blurred Polaroids and old lipsticks and shampoos that she used to use, and receipts from things she bought and notes in her handwriting. And every time they come to a new place, he puts this shrine up in the bathroom of their house. So like all around the bathtub, he sets out all the bits and pieces, and he puts the pictures up on the walls and the receipts and everything. So this is what he and Lou live with every day as a reminder, this kind of compass that Lily, the dead wife, is to them. To give you a kind of idea of the setting, it's mainly set in a fictionalized town called Olympus, Massachusetts, which is supposedly just outside Gloucester. So if you like reading for place and you know the North Shore, this is definitely going to ring some bells. Olympus is Lily, the dead wife and mother's hometown. And Lou and Hawley go back there when Lou is in Lou's teenage years to kind of try to give her a place to settle down and stop running. And the chapters alternate between Lou's life as a teenager, struggling to feel at home somewhere for the first time, and Hawley's past. And each of Hawley's chapters takes place in a different setting all around the US, giving it this kind of road movie feel. And each of those chapters documents how he gets one of the 12 scars on his body, bullet wounds that form a kind of map on his body of where he's been and what he's done. Maps are a very important kind of part of this story. A lot of characters searching for things, trying to find ways into love and out of loneliness. And, Lou uses the stars as a kind of map, but that's another story or another part of the story. But as you can see, there's a lot of layers to this, Beth, again, like what you were saying, a lot of imagery and references that make this a lot more than just a thriller or a mystery or a coming of age story. And I would say the arc of the story of Samuel and his daughter may not be completely surprising, that it's a tale of redemption. But I do think what Tinty does really, really well is kind of found in that mix of the grit and the tenderheartedness that I talked about at the beginning. She takes us into the inner world of these two people, this damaged man, this criminal, someone who you and I are unlikely to know, but here we get to be, in their lives, his life and his struggling teenage daughter. And in telling their stories, she makes us understand kind of both the character's ultimate humanity and maybe in the process kind of turns on its head our idea of who and what a hero really is. So that's the 12 Lives of Samuel Hawley by Hannah Tinty. And if you're noticing that there are a bunch of movie sort of references in there, it has actually been optioned for a movie. one of the Batman directors, I think, has taken it up. I think it's actually not a movie, it's a series they're going to make out of it, which makes a lot of sense, because with the alternating chapters, you can imagine looking back at his life in flashbacks. And I think it could be, if it's done well, it could be really, really a good one. So I think that's it, isn't it?
Yep.
Lots of,
That went by quickly.
yes, it did. Lots of many layered character stories of crimes and politicking and all kinds of stuff. So we hope you enjoyed that. And keep an eye out, as always, on our website, wakefieldlibrary.org, for other upcoming programming. In particular, our Commit to Your Community series. We have another book discussion coming up of Together by Vivek Murthy. And you can get the book now. And the discussion is December 10th.
December
2nd. Sorry, why do I always say that? The discussion is December 2nd. And we think it's going to be, it's a good book. Jeff's reading it right now, right?
I finished it. It's, I found it really fascinating, and yes, highly recommend it.
Lots of interesting talk about how we can all make connections to the people around us in this highly disconnected time. All right, so thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time on Beebe Book Buzz.